Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the next edition of Intacct CloudBytes. I am your presenter, Philip Massey of Massey Consulting. May sound familiar. Yes, there is a relationship there. But I do want to thank you for taking time out of what I am sure is an extremely busy day to attend this presentation. And I do hope that it turns out to be worth it. So today we're going to talk about going paperless, a very hot topic now for a good number of years. And our approach with this presentation is going to be one in which we talk about what it takes to go paperless, how to approach going paperless, and then at the end I'll wrap back up with a live look at the Intacct Marketplace to look at some of the solutions that are out there for paper management, document management, and some of those can be generic document management. Some of those can be document management tied along with payables management. A good portion of what a lot of organizations are looking for when they say document management is actually invoices from vendors and trying to keep some of that tidy, keep some of that managed and easily accessible in the future. I will mention that we are recording the presentation and we will make this presentation available on YouTube at the end, and we'll send out a link, as well as having it be something that everyone sees through social media. So appreciate your time, and if you're watching this in a recorded manner, thank you for stumbling upon the video perhaps and watching. All right, so let's get down into it, shall we? So who can go paperless? Anybody can go paperless, right? You can. Anybody with the right equipment, say with a scanner, or these days most vendors, if you are specifically looking for vendor management of paper, most vendors nowadays can send invoices electronically, and you're halfway there. I don't think personally that Massey Consulting has had a filing cabinet with things in it for at least maybe 5 to 6 years. Everything either gets scanned and saved or comes in a PDF format originally. So certainly makes finding things quite a bit more easier. Now, that's not to say that we're perfect or do it exactly right, but we're trying, right? So our agenda for today, we're going to discuss preparing and planning to go paperless. What's the resistance, and then what adjustments that need to happen in Intacct, like using the drag and drop ability for attachments and having the signature print on the checks through approvals inside of Intacct, to creating an ROI for going paperless and how that can lead to the different opportunities that you might have within your organization. Also include some other facts about going paperless that you might be able to use there to sell your boss on the process as well, if that's something that's needed, right? Okay, so don't have a whole lot of slides today, but we'll take our time on each of these, make sure that we go through everything thoroughly. And then certainly if you all have any questions, we're more than happy to answer those questions. And we'll have some contact information up throughout the broadcast here. So preparing to go paperless. So first step, determine your team and get the buy-in. So you'll need to convince your team that it's the right thing to do if they're not always there. Make sure they think that it's a good idea. Talk internally. Are there any concerns? Are there any questions? And there can be, right? As much as going paperless has been a concept in the past, still there is some trepidation for it, for moving forward with going paperless, because you don't have that physical piece of paper to touch. Much like companies are now finally overcoming the fear of going to the cloud for their accounting and moving away from an on-premise product where you did indeed have something that you could touch. So be sure to talk with your team, get buy-in from your team. Some of the benefits of going paperless, less physical space is needed. Scan those documents and then shred those documents so that they're no longer taking up a file cabinet. As I said, I don't have a filing cabinet. I do have a box where I've a filing box, hanging file folders in a box, where we do keep some paper copies of a few items, just more from a legal standpoint than anything else. But that one box covers 4 years, so it's not like we're keeping a lot of paper. So that's physical space, ability to centralize your document repository, so there's no questions about which cabinet is this in, which room is this in, is this on the second floor, third floor, where do we have these documents? Ideally it's within a searchable, retrievable database, whether that's in Intacct or whether it's in one of the complementary products or something of that nature. It's in a searchable area, a known area where it's a lot easier to retrieve that data. You have greater information security. So you've got these documents saved within a program that has user access rights in it, whether that's Intacct or, again, a complementary product, where you can control whether or not end users can get into the different pieces of paper, essentially virtual paper, that you have. If you continue to utilize the actual paper, you then get into aspects of, well, who's got a key to that room? Do we take the information about HR? Do we put that in that room? Do we put it in a separate room? Who has a key to that one? All kinds of topics and questions come up around information security when you're still dealing with paper forms. And for a long time, it was all we had, so that was accepted. But now we do have far greater ability to have more storage, more processes in place. We've got the cloud that we can fall back on. So a lot of options now that we just did not have before. You've got less liability from lost documents. So how many people have ever lost a paper document in the past? I'm sure I'd get quite a few hands raised if I were to ask that question. So with a retrieval software solution, then you've got much less chance of that happening, right, which is a good thing. Immense savings in time and searching tasks. So absolutely there, being able to go in to a system, and even if you have to go to a particular invoice, if you're keeping it in the accounting system, and click on the attachments and pull up the attachments, or go to a customer and pull up the attachments, or if it's stored in a complementary system to Intacct, then perhaps in that system you also have the capability to go in and do searches and retrieve the data in that system and search for specifics, much like you search for things with Google today as well. And then lastly, enhanced collaboration. Most of these systems, when we're talking about going paperless, especially if we talk about third-party products, you've got the ability to comment back and forth about the files. So you can attach a contract from a vendor that when you want to create a requisition, you've got a proposed contract from the vendor, you can attach that to it, and then you can collaborate back and forth about the transaction, about the requisition, things are attached with it, and all of that is collected inside your software product. So before we go further, I do have a poll question here, so I'm going to take just a moment and I'm going to put that poll question out there. So if you all could take a second here and click either yes or no. Are you currently storing any documents in Intacct? Okay, looks like we've got about, okay, looks like we've got some opportunity here. Not many people are storing documents inside of Intacct. All right, so got some opportunity there to to improve, perhaps. All right. So going paperless, right? So the next step is to get organized and make a plan. You talk with your team. You've decided as a group that this is definitely something that you want to do. Gotten approval from any management, at least preliminary approval, to explore the idea. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to make a written plan, right? Make a plan, set some goals for how you're going to become a paperless company. I'd say make sure that everyone in the company knows you're going paperless. And then what you'll find typically there is that many employees in different departments and different areas will embrace it because they know that the ability to search on documents and so forth is a tremendous benefit for all aspects of the organization. So I'm sure they'll jump right on board there. Would probably try to break this down into little pieces. We had a customer deploy Dynamic CRM, for example, not exactly the same thing, but you're still deploying a piece of software. And they broke it down department by department by department. And of course, accounting was the last one to switch over to the CRM system for some custom applications that they have. But they broke it down department by department so that they could make it an easier overall process. The most common place to go paperless, again, is going to be in payables. So a lot of companies will start with the accounts payable department. They'll get things down with the accounts payable department, and then they may roll it over to HR, right? They may roll it to receivables or sales. But they'll typically start with one department. And you may look at it and say, we have a few documents in the HR department. We have a ton of documents in the AP department. We may want to start with the HR department as a smaller example and work our way up to AP. And that's certainly valid as well. So start here to determine where your needs are. Talk to your IT department about network storage. And that's if you're not bringing it inside of, say, Intacct or one of the complementary products that does bring it into to the cloud. So you may just want to talk to them. And even if you're bringing it into the cloud, there's options with Intacct about storage in certain areas. If we talk about completely paperless, then we also talk about printing financial statements, for example. And there are capabilities within running reports, including financial statements, where you can produce copies of those out to something like Dropbox or Box.net or something of that nature. So that you're still producing the reports, you're just keeping in line with the paperless concept, right? So paperless means no paper, and that includes potentially financials. Okay. So determine where your needs are, talk to IT about network storage, and if you want to truly go paperless, there may be things that you don't want in Intacct or perhaps don't belong in Intacct or one of the add-on products, and you may need some network storage space. So it's something to think about, something to plan for. There's some other considerations that need to be made when you go in paperless. Dual monitors is almost a must. If you don't have two monitors, you're going to wind up with some type of scanning product on the one monitor that you're working with and trying to do accounting transactions in Intacct. And you don't want to have that happen, right? You want to be able to have a second monitor, have the scanning application open in the second monitor so that you are scanning into that. And then from there, if you want to drag and drop, attach it in Intacct, or perhaps directly scan it into a complementary application, you'd be able to do that, and you would be covering up your Intacct application. So also then, depending upon the size of the finance team, you might want to get personal scanners or have some kind of scanning process that makes it easy for the employee to scan documents, save them to the network or individual machines, and attach them to the transactions as needed. Now, I just said individual machines. I don't advocate that Earl have a scanner attached to his machine and every invoice in the company be scanned by Earl and they're saved on Earl's C drive under documents, and that's the only place they reside, because that's a disaster waiting to happen. You know, if you're scanning and saving to a local machine, you need to make sure that you're going to either move them to a network share or to a Dropbox location, or ideally, where it's appropriate, attach those to the transactions inside of Intacct. So either way, though, you've got to have a scanner. As many vendors as there are out there right now that do send PDF copies of invoices through the email, there are still plenty that do not. And so you're going to need to be able to take those documents and scan them. You're also going to have some potentially signed HR documentation for your employees that you're going to need to scan. So think about it. Do you need individual scanners? Do you need a large copier, scanner, printer device like a Konica Minolta or something of that nature sitting in a centralized location, and work with that? You know, that's up to you. It depends on how many people you have that are going to be working with it and how often they're going to be working with it. So, I've worked in institutions in the past that had just the huge scanners. Could scan so many pages a minute, print so many pages a minute, scanned in color, did front and back, all these different things. And I've also worked in environments where we had a little sheet fed scanner that just sat on the desktop there, and you scanned in that way. Either way, you're going to get PDFs out of it. Either way, you're going to make a step towards paperless. You just want to make sure that you make the right step for your organization. Okay? And then, lastly, another good thing to have is, of course, a shredder. A good shredder within the organization. And I attended an ITA meeting a while back down in Florida, thankfully several months ago, before Irma came to visit. But I attended that, and one of the gentlemen that spoke was actually a reformed, well, now he'd be a security expert, but he was not that previously. And one of the tips that he gave was that working with the FBI, he had discovered that really the only shredders that actually do their job to the extent that they should be doing them are the shredders that are labeled micro-cut shredders. So when you purchase a shredder, I would absolutely, or if you want to work with a recycling company, make sure they're bonded and insured and all that. But if you want your own shredder, and this goes even for personal at home, make sure it says micro cut. That way it chops the pieces up tiny enough that it is extremely difficult for them to be put back together. He was saying something along the lines of the cross-cut shredders could be put back together in about 4 hours, any document, with the tools that the FBI has. The single cut shredders can be put back together in a matter of minutes with the tools that the FBI has, but the micro cut shredders can take years to put one piece of paper back together. So he was definitely advocating that, which is kind of funny that the FBI would advocate that, right? You'd think they would want everybody to buy the simple ones so they could put them back together pretty easily. All right, and then finally, you may want to think about the fact that if you're doing this, there could be a need for some additional business licenses. Whether it's check signers, whether it's people attaching transactions, things like that, you may, right? You may get by with the staff that you have, and that's certainly understandable, but it's a consideration, something to think about. Preparing all the other stakeholders. So one of the things you're definitely going to want to do is you're going to want to create some non-personal emails like ap@company.com. Prepare your vendors, let them know that you now have an email address like that, and update all the contact emails inside the Intacct application. It's a matter of trying to standardize, right? So we have an address at Massey Consulting that we give out to all the vendors. If someone is going to email us an invoice, it goes to that address, which is picked up by our AP automation system, which also does the document management for us. So we let the vendors know, start sending things to this address now. Going forward, send them to here, and they're automatically a part of our workflow process. Plus, I get the benefit of the document management as well. Okay. So funny little cartoon there that you can take a look at, the extreme paperless organization where the gentleman's run out of toilet paper, and coworker tells them that they're a paperless office. So I don't think that's quite the type of paper that they were looking for there, but I found that to be kind of funny, so thought I'd throw that in. All right, so as I talked about briefly on one of the other slides here, going paperless, you want to make it easier to put those attachments into Intacct. So in order to do that, you'll need to be set up to do the drag and drop, and it really affects now most all areas of Intacct. I think there's some ancillary setup options where there's not an attachments area to it, but for the most part, there is a field choice on most all of the screens where you can drag and drop and attach a file. So, the main steps for setting up the drag and drop attachments inside of Intacct, if that's the way that you want to go, and it's a perfectly acceptable way of going with it as well. Not everyone needs a paper save or an up level or something of that nature to be a bolt-on add-on solution. Some folks are really just looking for the ability to attach some contracts, attach some vendor agreements to the vendors and things like that. So you just want to be able to scan those, save them as PDFs, and then drag and drop them on top of the appropriate record in Intacct. Okay. First thing you want to do then is make sure you got the folders within the Intacct application. You're going to want to add some general folders. You go to Company, and you'll open the Setup area, and then you go to Attachment folders. And this is an area inside the Intacct application where you can see that attachment folder structure. You can make changes to it. You can rearrange your folders, add folders, delete folders, make a lot of changes to the nature of that attachment folder structure. Okay. Now, one thing to be careful of is sometimes you're going to want to have a lot of folders. You don't necessarily need to get that detailed with the folders that you have. When I first started doing it, for example, there were any number of folders that I had created, basically one folder per vendor, and found out as I was going through it that wasn't nearly as important as the transaction they were attached to. because you don't often go back through the folder structure itself looking for documents. You're typically going back to the transaction, going back to the master record, going back to some type of object inside of Intacct and looking for those different transactions that way, or perhaps doing a search if available in the system. But you're not typically going through and looking for a folder structure to find the documents that you're looking for. Now, that being said, don't just simply put a documents folder and throw everything in that one folder. Generally, what I recommend is that you may have a vendor folder. And, you may put everything in that vendor folder, all the invoices from those vendors, or maybe you put all the contracts from the vendors in that folder. And then maybe you have a bills folder where you put bills into. You have backup for your general ledger entries in a GL folder. And you kind of work it that way. And if you want to break it down more and say, well, these are direct expenses and these are indirect expenses from my vendors, and break it down that way, that's fine. I don't think it adds a lot of benefit within the Intacct system to go down to, say, the vendor level and dump all of the documents for one vendor under them and all the documents for the next under them. So nothing wrong with doing it that way, but it's going to create a lot of folders within your system that you're really not going to go back and use a terrible lot. Okay? You're going to want to add a numbering sequence to be used with the attachments, and that's purely an attachment ID number. And that is done inside of Intacct as well. That's under company setup and then document numbering, and you'll want to add one for attachments. Next is going to be enabling that auto numbering for your attachments. You'll go to company info, click the edit button. On the main tab, scroll down to global settings, and then choose the appropriate document numbering sequence. So a few things to do with this to get the drag and drop features and functionality set up in the system, but certainly not anything that is extraordinarily difficult. So you get all these items done, and then one of the things you'll want to do is test it, right? So pull up a journal entry, something of that nature, grab a file, drag it over, drop it on top of it, make sure the numbering scheme works, save it, pull it back up, look at it, make sure it's still there, and just double check that things are working the way that you would anticipate them to work. Okay. So after all that, let's talk about naming conventions. And to me, naming conventions are one of the most important things that you can do inside your, well, any system, really. I was going to say inside your accounting solution with Intacct, but really any system. So naming conventions are extremely important to me. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. Without any kind of convention, then it's just a free-for-all, right? It's chaos. So and it may not be quite that bad, but for purposes of this presentation, we'll tend towards exaggeration. For going paperless, it's important to have a naming convention for the vendor bills, for example, that are saved to the network. Maybe you want to do the vendor name first, and then the bill number. If there is no bill number, perhaps the date. And you may also want to think about saying something along the lines of first 10 characters of the vendor name, first 15 characters of the vendor name, something of that nature, so that the names themselves don't get extraordinarily long if you start dealing with supercalifragilisticexpialidocious incorporated, right? So that's something to think about. Other areas of Intacct where naming conventions are important are going to be account groups, contracts, custom reports, custom views, financial reports. So naming conventions are important throughout the entire system, but especially important with the document management and retrieval aspect of the system. So again, here just a little funny item that I had seen. Dilbert, you gotta love the Dilbert cartoons, and this one in particular is talking about the file naming conventions, and someone just tosses in the hat size of the nearest squirrel being a part of the naming convention. So thought that was kind of funny there. Preparing for other stakeholders, executive buy-in. So how hard is it to do things within your organization if the executives and the management don't support you? I think if I had a poll question out for that right now on a scale of 1 to 10, we'd probably get back a lot of 10s. So, the executive buy-in is important. Say, for example, it's the executive that's been signing the checks, and you want to go paperless with this, and they're just not comfortable giving up signing the checks because they've been doing it manually now for 20 years. They like having the checks. They like seeing them, touching them, smelling them, holding them, and any of that backup documentation, seeing all the handwritten approvals and things like that. There'll be people like that will resist the paperless project. But typically after the first time they're able to approve something, whether it's an AP invoice or check or what have you, they are on their way to the airport. They're using their cell phone or their iPad while they're in their Uber ride getting there, or their chauffeured ride, I guess, if they're an executive. Then, doing it along that route methodology will certainly be something that they will come to appreciate. They'll know they're not tied to the office anymore. And by that same token, when you have people that can retrieve that documentation without having to go down to the basement and pull open the file cabinet from 2 years ago and search for files and documentation out there, when you hit that moment, then you'll have believers within the organization. So not everybody's going to be a believer. It is going to be a fundamental change, and there will be a fair amount of struggle with it, whether it's with the initial cost, as we have here, or just the overall process. There will be some struggle with it, but there'll come a point where the tide turns and everybody is appreciative for the paperless office that they're in. Good quote there, one of my favorite ones. One reason people resist change is because they focus on what they have to give up instead of what they have to gain. So, they focus on giving up the ability to touch that paper rather than the ability to bring that contract up anywhere, anytime, and look at the PDF copy. So one other thing here, there's a few steps on adding an employee in Intacct to approve checks and have their signature print on the checks so that they no longer have to do it manually. If the signer is not a business user, they'll need to be changed or added as one. Could encounter some extra charges for that. They'll need to have the appropriate permissions inside the system. You'll need to look at potentially setting up approvals inside the system so that you can have those approvals turned on with that check selection process. You need to import a signature, do it in My Preferences, or if it's overall for the organization, you can do it in Cash Management. And we skipped the approvals a little bit. Just to be clear with the approvals, you can have different levels of approval within the organization based on amounts and a couple of other criteria there. So you will have the ability really to lay out a process within the Intacct application to to have a strong approval system to guard against the fact of any checks being cut or written that perhaps shouldn't be, right? So there's also payment notifications in the system that will have to be looked at for ACH and things like that, where the notification is sent out to folks. You have to make sure that those are well taken care of. And all of that really is a part of the training. You're trained on how to approve documents, how to see attachments, all the different aspects of going paperless inside the Intacct application. And the better the training is, the more likely the individuals are to accept earlier the process. And then one of the great things to do to kind of demonstrate how much of a time saver this is going to be is to do things like make a dashboard for the approver. So if we take a look at this next screen here, you can see sort of what that looks like. You see the red arrow there, approved payments, approved journal entries, approved purchases, approved expenses, approved timesheets. So, you can set up these approval objects on your dashboards and have them there for people to be able to readily use within the system so they can easily see what's on their agenda. And if they have these things, then they will definitely be able to streamline their processes, which will make them a lot more accepting of the overall change of going paperless within your corporate environment. So here's some things about the return on investment. Other opportunities here. American Express check delivery service. We haven't talked about that, but Amex does have a check delivery service inside of Intacct. American Express ACH. They do have that inside of Intacct as well. So that, again, is sort of a paperless area. Digital board books. Digital board books are available inside the system, and that is a way of producing information. And producing that information so that you're not producing it on paper. You got your board book, your on-screen dashboard created for it. Could lead to discussions with other departments about how can we do this? How can we go, which I don't think this is a word, but spreadsheetless within our part of the organization as well. And a few other things there, some additional points of interest maybe inside purchasing or project accounting, or let's take a look at employee expenses. Let's go paperless with that as well. Okay. So here's some interesting facts that might help you with developing an ROI, which we are happy to help you do, but we also want to make sure that we equip you with the tools to be able to do what you want to do as well. 70% of time is spent processing paper. So on average, 70% of your time, my time, Steve's time, Bob's time, 70% of that time is spent processing paper in some way. Whether you're moving paper, whether you're printing documents, whether you're scanning documents, those kinds of things, 70% of your time is spent processing paper. 90% of documents are paper. 7.5% of documents are lost. 15% of documents are misplaced, which I'm thinking we're kind of splitting hairs there, right? 7.5% are lost, 15% are misplaced. That might be the PC word for making it 22.5% are lost. 30% of the workday is spent searching for hard copy documents. Think about it around audit time. How much time do you spend at audit time looking for paper documents? How often do you come back and say, we can't find that document? We've got this copy, but we don't have the signed copy. You know, something of that nature. Or we've got version 2, but not version 3. So, you know, run a paperless office, scan those, save those, or just plain save them within, say, the Intacct application, and you'll be able to pull back up whatever you might need. 30% of documents contain obsolete information. I know I still get invoices from customers, or from vendors, I'm sorry, invoices from vendors that if they had to mail them to me, I'd never get them because they have the address that we used at this point probably 4 years ago. And that address has not been updated despite my efforts to try to get them to do so. And one interesting fact here, one 4-drawer file cabinet holds 15 to 20,000 pages, costs $25,000 to fill, and $2,000 per year to maintain. So $25,000 to fill, you may wonder, where is that coming from? Well, labor to file those documents, paper costs, ink costs, folder costs, all of those types of costs are involved in it, but by far the biggest expense is going to be labor with it. That's typically one of the bigger expenses in most ROI calculations is labor. And it costs $2,000 per year to maintain, and that's because you have people going to those file cabinets, searching through those file cabinets, spending time manually sifting through the information as opposed to being able to do some type of global search within a software solution and find the document they're looking for quickly and easily. So, and there's a website reference down at the bottom there for where we pulled those statistics from, totallypaperless.com. If you want to take a look at that, you are more than welcome to. All right, so let's look at a few other statistics here on our last slide that we'll be showing. A typical office worker spends 40% of their time looking for information. Professionals spend over 500 hours annually reviewing and routing files, 150 hours annually looking for incorrectly filed documents, and the average document is copied 9 times. Now, those 3 things are from Gartner, good, reputable organization. As far as the cost of mishandling paper, Inc. magazine says it costs $20 to file a document. It costs $120 to search for a misfiled document, and if you can't find it, it costs approximately $250 to recreate a lost document. Now, also keep in mind that it's going to cost a lot more than that if you're looking for necessary accounting information, backup copies of contracts, copies of invoices, $120 to search for it, but if you can't find it and you happen to be called to the carpet on it from auditors or worse yet, the Internal Revenue Service, then it could be far greater than $250 cost to you for not having that document, especially not having that document enough times, right? So think about those things as far as the ROI goes. We've here, again, I don't say that we do things perfectly, but all of our AP invoices, for example, run through the document management system, and I could do a lookup by vendor. I can drill into the invoices for that vendor. I can pull copies up at any point. There's just a myriad of different things that I can do with the document management AP automation solution that we have. That really just makes things a lot easier on me if I need to go back and recall something. Okay. All right, so let's take a break for just 1 second here, and I am going to slide over the Intacct Marketplace. So if you all have not been to the Intacct Marketplace before, I would absolutely recommend that you go out and take a look. And right now what I did was I simply went to marketplace.intacct.com, and that'll take you to where you need to go. And I came into the search bar here and just typed in the word document and did a search, and these are the items that came up for it. So some of these aren't really going to be document management systems. I think sometimes folks have a generosity about the way they describe their products. But here's DocuPeek by Webaplex, document management and business process automation. Use is an accounts payable automation that also handles accounts payable documents. Tally is an expense software. Expense Path is an expense software. They help manage expense documentation, as does Paramount. AvidXchange is an AP and payment automation product. This is one of the partners that we love working with at Massey Consulting. They do great work. They have an outstanding product. We've got a number of customers that do run it. And it's a full-blown AP automation that will do everything from key your documents in for you, scan your documents in for you, process the payment to the vendor, anything in between. Bill.com is an AP automation product, been around for a very long time, great product. I actually use it in-house. It's a great product. PaperSave is one of the document management systems. So this is one of the systems that will integrate with most areas of Intacct, as well as will have its own document management capabilities. So if you wanted to extend that to folks that aren't necessarily in accounting, you would be able to do that as well. Also has routing and so forth built into it. UpLevel to the right of that is one of the other products that's similar to PaperSave. It is a full-blown document management system, and they give you, for example, with UpLevel, the ability to have unlimited storage space. So if you have other types of documentation that you want to store, not only will it interface with Intacct, but it will also allow you to store additional information as well. Okay. MineralTree is an AP automation product that's out there. That's a good solution. It's along the lines of Bill.com and AvidXchange. And so you've got a couple of straight up document management solutions with PaperSave and UpLevel and DocuPeek. And then you have products like Use that does AP along with AvidXchange, Bill.com, and MineralTree. And you've got some expense solutions as well that help you from an expense standpoint. There. Okay. So I wanted to show you that so that you've got an idea. Certainly feel free to go out to the marketplace, or if you have specific questions and you want to address them to me, that is absolutely fine. So at this point, I just want to say thank you for coming. Look out for our next Intacct CloudBytes presentation. It's going to be October the 26th. Doing it a little bit later next month, but that's because of the Intacct Advantage Conference. And so that's going to be on AR and AP reconciliation best practices. So we're going to get into the Intacct solution and talk about how you reconcile your AR and AP subledgers with the general ledger of Intacct. So that'll certainly be a presentation to watch. Look out for announcements on that. If you're watching this and you don't get the announcements from Massey and you would like to get those announcements, please just send an email to info, I-N-F-O, at masseyconsulting.net, and we'd be happy to add you to the list. All right. Again, I do appreciate your time for today. It's been wonderful chatting with you. I hope that you found it to be enjoyable, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Let us know if you need anything from us at all. Thank you very much.